Hi girls, this is Miss O'Brien. Hope you're all doing well. We are going into our next part of chapter 3. So as you know, we talked all about demand in our last 3 sections. So now we're going to get into supply. So these are just the objectives of our lesson today. We are working on fundamentals of supply, section 3.4. So of course we want to explain the law of supply, interpret a supply schedule and supply graph, and examine the relationship between elasticity of supply and time. So this should sound familiar. We looked at the same basic fundamentals when we started studying demand. So let's just have a little preview here, girls. Let's say you are a business owner and you sell gourmet popsicles. It's the summer, it's hot, you have a popsicle stand and you're selling them for $3 each. So what if you come to find that your customers were willing to buy your product even if you raise the price 20%? So even if you start charging $3.60, sorry girls, your customers will still buy it at that higher price. Would you raise the price? Most of us would say yes. Your answer should be yes. You're going to make more profit. But there's other things to consider. Would you take an extra day off of work each week to make the same amount if you could make the same income with 20% less work each week? Meaning if you could charge that higher price and say at the end of the week you'd make $1,000 in profit and you could achieve that by working less, maybe only 4 days instead of 5, would you do that? That question might be answered differently. Some of us may say, yes, we'd love a day off. Others might say, no, I'm a hard worker and I can make even more money if I work 5 days. So, those questions we're going to look at as we go through the lesson. But as a general rule, as prices rise, producers, so the makers of that good, will offer a good and more suppliers will enter the market to get a share of the profits. So again, you're going to offer more of your good at a higher price in the hopes of making more profit, but we'll see what happens. If everyone realizes that you can sell gourmet popsicles and make a lot of money doing it, you're going to all of a sudden have other people, other suppliers flood the market in order to try to get a piece of that revenue, right? They're going to try to compete with you to make the same money. All right, sorry girls. So the law of the supply. So supply is simply the amount of goods available. And the question will always be, how much should we supply? So producers offer more of a good as the price increases and less as the price falls. So again, if you sell popsicles or you sell cars and the price goes up, you want to sell more at that higher price. So again, you will produce more at a higher price and less as the price falls. So notice that this is different than demand. So economists use the term quantity supplied to describe how much of a good or service a producer is willing and able to sell at a specific price. So a producer could be called a supplier, a company, an owner, whoever supplies product to a market. So as we study this, the law of supply develops from the choices of both current and new producers of a good. As prices of goods rise, firms produce more in order to earn additional revenue. Okay, so as I mentioned before, if you are making a killing selling these popsicles, other people are going to come into the market and try to get a piece of that from you. They're going to start to sell popsicles too. And if you are not making much money at all, or people move on from the popsicle trend and start buying hot pretzels instead, suppliers will leave that market, okay? Because they're not making money. Remember, they want to make money. So these movements of individuals and firms changing their level of production, we're making more popsicles this week than last week, etc., creates the law of supply. Okay, so if your firm is already earning a profit by selling a good, then an increase in the price will increase the firm's profit and they'll produce more. So let's move away from popsicles and go back to our favorite pizza. So you're the owner of Pronto. So if the price of pizza rises, but the cost of making pizza stays the same, of course, you're going to produce more and sell more pizza. So if it costs you 50 cents to make a slice and you're selling that slice for $1, you're making a profit of 50 cents, right? If it still costs 50 cents to make that one slice, you start charging $1.25, all of a sudden your profit increases to 75%, right? So you're going to produce more and sell more pizza at that higher price. I hope that makes sense. So if the price of pizza goes down, you're going to earn less profit per slice or lose money, okay? You don't want to lose money as Pronto Pizza, so you're going to sell less pizza at that price. And we'll look at some charts as we go on, and hopefully it'll make more sense. Or if you're not making a profit selling pizza, you're going to change your business model, right? You're going to make calzones, you're going to make chicken fingers, you're going to make, sandwiches instead, right? Because that search for profit is going to drive your decisions. And this comes back to the first lesson of economics, right? Economics is not just about money. It's about these decisions that we make every day. This is just one of the examples of, when prices go up, suppliers recognize a chance to make more money and produce more. They decide that decision will be to make more of that good, and vice versa. When price goes down, suppliers are discouraged from producing as much as before because they realize that this is not good business for them, right? People are not going to buy it at that price. So again, profit, profit, profit. People want to make money, individuals, businesses, the government, right? So again, if producers already in the market, they're making a lot of money selling this one good or service. If the pizza price rise, this might be a good opportunity to start your own pizza. So all of a sudden, especially if you think of a new food trend, think about when sushi wasn't really readily available, in the late 80s and early 90s, and you wouldn't find many sushi restaurants, right? So then once they started to make a profit and become successful, more and more people enter that space, right? More and more restaurateurs open their own sushi restaurant, right? If you think about music, like in the 70s, disco is popular. So record labels were making a lot of money producing disco songs, disco groups. So a lot of other people entered that market, right? But eventually it faded out. In the 90s, that's my generation, right? Grunge music, Nirvana, bands like Pearl Jam, all of those bands were so popular, and record labels hired more and more grunge groups because they saw the profit, right? There was profit to be made with those groups. So more and more of those type of bands were signed on. You could say the same thing for then the early 2000s. We moved away from grunge, and what became popular? Pop, right? Britney Spears, Jessica Simpson, Backstreet Boys, right? So you saw, there was multiple boy bands at one time because, again, there was money to be made, right? So again, this is all reflective of the law of supply, which states that the quantity supplied increases as the price of that good increases. Sorry, girls, I went the wrong way. Okay, bear with me. All right, so now we're going to look at a supply schedule, and it's just like the demand schedule, only for supply. So it's going to show the relationship between price and quantity supplied for a specific good, or how much of a good a supplier will offer at various prices. So it's only going to take into account the two variables, which are the things that can change, which is, again, we're back to our pizza, the price of a slice of pizza and the number of slices supplied. We're not taking into account any other variables. The fact that the tomato crop wasn't good that year, that the rent of the pizzeria went astronomically high, so they would have to raise their prices. So we're just simply looking at the two variables. So here is an individual supply schedule, right? So that is going to be one person. So that would be my supply schedule, which is looking at the price of the slice and how many slices would be supplied per day. So at $1, right, the pizzeria will supply 100 slices. At $2, 150. At $3, 200. $4, 250. All the way up to $6, and the pizzeria will supply 350 slices. So hopefully you can see that as the price goes up, the quantity supplied also goes up, right? Because if the pizzeria can sell a slice for $6, they absolutely want to be able to charge $6. That's when they'll make the most money, right? They don't want to sell dollar slices. They won't be as successful. And the market supply schedule is the same exact relationship, except remember that is on a larger scale. So this is perhaps all pizzerias on the North Shore of Staten Island, how many slices they are going to supply. So 1,000 all the way up to 3,500. But just make sure you understand the relationship. As the price goes up, the amount supplied will also go up. Okay, so again, a rise and fall of the price of pizza will cause the quantity supply to change, but not the supply schedule. So a change in the goods price moves the seller from one row to another, but doesn't necessarily change the schedule itself. Okay, so if a factor other than price, so like I mentioned before, the tomato crops are terrible this year, the rent goes astronomically high, you have to look at a new supply schedule. Okay, so we would have to redo these two charts due to this new variable. Okay, and the market supply, I think you understand already, is just that is going to look at the market rather than just one particular individual, right? So it'd be the total supply of pizza in a city, okay? But again, the relationship is going to be the same. All right, and just like demand, if you plot those individual data points and you graph them, they create the supply curve. So it's just simply a graphic representation of the supply schedule. And it's similar to demand, x-axis, y-axis. Y-axis shows the quantity of goods supplied. And then again, you can have an individual supply curve and a market supply curve. The relationship, you can see the red line, the data points it looks exactly the same because the relationship is the same. It's always going to rise from left to right. So it moves towards higher and higher output levels as higher prices. Because as we already established, at higher prices, suppliers will supply more. Okay, so again, this illustrates the law of supply, which says that higher prices lead to higher output. They want to make more money at those higher prices. Okay, so it's just a little bit bigger graphic. These are also available in your textbook. And now we're just going to review the concept of elasticity of supply. So we've already learned that elasticity of demand measures how consumers will react to price changes when we talked about that earlier. So elasticity of supply is based on the same concept. So it's going to measure the way quantity supplied reacts to a change in price. Okay, so if the supply is very responsive to price changes, supply is elastic. If it's not responsive to price changes, supply is inelastic, okay? And we'll go through some examples of that. So, elasticity of supply and time. So time will affect the elasticity of supply. It will affect whether it's elastic or inelastic, because similar to demand, when we talked about like the gas crisis and you need gas for your car. There's no substitute. So in the short run, people will buy the higher price gas. But in the long run, eventually people will figure out solutions around that. They'll walk more, they'll take public transportation, they'll carpool, they'll buy a more fuel efficient car. So supply works in a very similar fashion. In the short run, it's really tough to change output levels. So that is very inelastic because, it's not very responsive immediately. But in the long run, firms are going to be more flexible, and that will create more of an elastic supply. So here is an example. Sorry if I'm talking so fast. So in the short run, okay, you are a farmer, you have an orange grove, so you grow oranges. And, that is a business that will have a lot of difficulty adjusting to a change of a price in the short term, right? Simply because orange trees don't grow overnight. They take several years to grow fruit. So if the prices go up, the grower can plant more trees, but has to wait years for that investment to pay off, right? So there's really not much he can do quickly to increase his supply of oranges. Even if people are willing to pay $8 for a gallon of orange juice at the store, that supply is very inelastic, right? Because again, you can't quickly change your output because you have to wait for the oranges to grow. So in the short run, if the price of oranges fall, there's really few ways to cut supply. So again, now if people are not willing to pay for orange juice, they'll only pay $2, right? And you would want to cut your supply. It's very difficult for that orange farmer to do, right? He's heavily invested in land and trees. You're going to produce oranges no matter what. You can't tell the trees to stop growing, to stop producing fruit, right? So you're probably still gonna pick all of those oranges and sell the same amount. It's really, really difficult to adjust your supply. So I hope you girls see that, okay? There's, of course, other businesses that are more elastic, okay? So take, for example, a hair salon or a barbershop. Obviously, they're producing a service. That is really highly elastic demand. So if the supply of haircuts can easily be expanded or reduced. So if prices rise, right, and people are willing to pay more for a haircut, you can hire more workers. You can extend your store hours, New shops are going to open pretty quickly, right? So you can very, very quickly adapt to that change and supply more haircuts, right? And the same thing happens if people aren't spending money on haircuts. You can cut your workers' hours. You could lay off perhaps one of your stylists. You could close earlier that day. So that is just super, super elastic, okay? Because you can easily adapt and easily change your supply output and quickly. All right, so in the long run, again, like demand, supply can become more elastic over time. If you have, if you have more time to kind of sort out these production issues or these problems, you can adapt. So the orange grower could not increase his output when the price of oranges rose. He can't make those oranges grow overnight, but he could plant more trees to increase supply. Okay, that response will just become more effective over time as the trees grow and obviously start to bear fruit. So, in several years from now, that farmer will see, will be able to sell, those oranges at higher prices. So if you have a longer time to respond to a price change, again, that supply will become, you'll have more elasticity. So that is our introduction to supply. Again, it's going to follow a similar pattern as when we looked at demand. And I just want you girls, again, to be able to understand what the law of supply is, then be able to look at supply schedules, and then be able to understand if you were looking at the supply curve, right? That graphic representation of it. And then also be able to identify your vocabulary terms. What does elastic mean? What does inelastic mean? And what are specific scenarios or examples that explain both of those concepts?